A 2-year-old is being exposed to organic kale chips at 12 times the safe neurotoxin limit while his dad eats Doritos and has completely normal blood work, which tells you everything you need to know about the wellness industry. Which should be impossible. You can't get contaminated by anything. The laws of physics don't work that way. Chemistry doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't work that way. Which means either the EPA is testing the wrong house, or the contaminant is coming from somewhere so obvious nobody thought to check. Unless you shop at Whole Foods. But we'll get to that. Spoiler, we're getting to that, and you're not going to like it. August 2022, California. A 39-year-old mother walks into a clinic. She can't feel her feet, her stomach is failing, her hair is falling out in clumps. The kind of hair loss that screams, chemo patient, except she's never had cancer, just expensive taste in snacks, just a Costco membership, and a belief that anything labeled superfood is basically medicine. Just a deep and abiding faith that if something costs $9 and comes in matte packaging, it must be good for you. And when they test her urine for heavy metals, the number next to thallium makes the lab tech call the supervisor, probably interrupting his lunch, probably ruining his day, definitely ruining hers, definitely making him reconsider his career choices, definitely making her reconsider every grocery store decision she's made in the last year. 5.6 micrograms per gram of creatinine. Normal is zero point 0.4. She's 12 times over the threshold. That's not elevated. That's catastrophic. For context, that's like finding gasoline in your orange juice. Except gasoline is marketed as a vitamin and certified organic and costs $8.99 per bag and has a minimalist label with a sans serif font and probably says something inspirational in lowercase letters. Something about nourishing your body or honoring your wellness journey. Something that makes you feel good about paying $9 for what is essentially expensive leaves that someone put in a dehydrator and called dinner. But here's where it stops making sense. Her husband gets tested. His levels? Completely normal. He lives in the same house, breathes the same air, drinks the same water, sleeps in the same bed, shares the same mortgage, argues about the same thermostat settings. He watched the same shows on the same couch, but his body is clean. Hers is contaminated. Spoiler, he just has normal taste in food. He eats Doritos like a sensible person. He eats things that come in shiny bags with artificial flavors and zero pretense about being healthy. He's living his best life on Cool Ranch, and his nervous system thanks him for it. His neurons are throwing a party. His peripheral nerves are sending thank you cards. And then they test the children, a 5-year-old, 2-year-old twins. The results come back 1.5, 6.8, and 9.7 micrograms per gram of creatinine. The twins, barely out of diapers, are testing at 8 times and 12 times the normal threshold. One of them can barely say the word organic, but apparently his body can metabolize it just fine. Or rather, it can't, which is the problem. So the kid's vocabulary is still developing, but his toxic metal exposure is already in the advanced placement category. He can't count to 10, but his thallium levels are off the charts. He's overachieving in all the wrong metrics. Priorities. Thallium doesn't just appear in random family members while skipping others. It's not selective. It doesn't have preferences. It doesn't discriminate based on age or gender or political affiliation. It's an equal opportunity toxin. So it means it's very progressive that way, very inclusive. Everyone's nervous system is equally welcome to deteriorate. It's not airborne in household concentrations high enough to cause this. It's not in the municipal water supply or someone would have noticed. So the California Department of Public Health does what they always do when environmental contamination is suspected. They call the EPA. The Environmental Protection Agency sends an on-scene coordinator. That's the person they deploy to chemical spills and Superfund sites. The kind of specialist who shows up when things have gone very, very wrong. And they collect samples, 25 of them, surface soil, drinking water, indoor air, surface dust. They test everything with equipment that can detect contaminants at parts per trillion, and every single sample comes back clean. 0 thallium detected. Not in the dirt, not in the water, not in the air they're breathing. Why? The house is cleaner than a pharmaceutical lab, which means the contaminant isn't in the environment. And then someone asked the question that should have been asked on day 1. What are they eating? The household exposure survey reveals something interesting. The mother and her 3 children consume kale chips, a specific brand, organic, marketed as a superfood. They eat up to 3 28-gram servings per day, every single day, because of my health, because of wellness. Because Instagram influencers said kale is basically a vegetable vitamin. The father doesn't touch them. I don't like the taste. Doesn't understand why anyone would voluntarily eat dehydrated leaves that taste like cardboard dipped in sadness. So they test the kale chips. The results? 1.98 milligrams per kilogram of thallium and 2.15 milligrams per kilogram in a second sample. For comparison, there is no federal safety limit for thallium in food. Nah, because until 2023, the FDA wasn't even testing for it. The FDA has limits for arsenic, for lead, for cadmium, for mercury, but thallium, never heard of her. Thallium is basically that forgotten middle child of the periodic table. But these levels? High enough to harm an entire family over the course of months. Now here's the part that should terrify you. Kale doesn't just absorb nutrients from soil, it absorbs everything. Thallium is a heavy metal that occurs naturally in trace amounts in the Earth's crust. Most plants take up a little bit. They're polite about it. A nibble here, a taste there. But brassicaceae plants, kale, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, they're special. And by special, I mean they have no self-control. They bioaccumulate thallium into their leaves at up to 80 times the concentration of the soil they're grown in. It's essentially a leafy green vacuum cleaner. No, except instead of sucking up dirt, it's sucking up neurotoxins. And then you eat it. Congratulations, you're at the bottom of a very stupid food chain. The kale chips were certified organic, which means no synthetic pesticides. Nobody checked if the kale was moonlighting as a toxic waste sponge. But hey, at least it was non-GMO. No genetically modified organisms, just naturally occurring problematic compounds. Totally different. So the family stops eating the kale chips. And over the next 10 to 30 days, the biological half-life of urinary thallium, their levels start dropping. By August 2023, the mother's gastrointestinal symptoms resolve. Nerve conduction studies show objective improvement back to the normal range. The toddler's leg pain stops. The abnormal eye movements improve. The 5-year-old can walk without episodes of pain. The family recovers, not because of medication, not because of treatment, but because they stopped eating healthy food. The contaminant wasn't sprayed from the sky. It wasn't in the water or soil or air. It was sitting in the pantry, in a bag with a picture of a smiling farmer. The farmer is still smiling, by the way. He doesn't know his kale is causing problems for nervous systems. He thinks he's growing wellness. He's actually growing evidence for a future class action lawsuit. The family recovers. The toddler starts walking again. And you're probably thinking, okay, isolated incident, freak accident, won't happen to me. Except it's not isolated, because 97% of Americans have toxic chemicals in their blood right now. And the source isn't what anyone's saying it is. 97%. That number has been circulating online for months. Viral posts, panicked threads, YouTube videos with millions of views. The claim? Blood tests reveal that 97% of Americans are contaminated with heavy metals. Aluminum, barium, strontium. The source? Chemtrails, stratospheric aerosol injection. Secret government programs releasing substances from planes. Direct quote from one viral post. Nearly every American, the CDC says 97% has some level of forever chemicals in their blood. And that part is true. The 97% statistic is real. It comes from CDC data, from a program called NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. The CDC has been running it since 1999. They sample roughly 5,000 people per year, test their blood and urine for hundreds of substances, release the data in 2-year cycles. It's publicly available. You can download it right now. But here's where it gets darkly hilarious. The 97% statistic has absolutely nothing to do with heavy metals from chemtrails. It doesn't refer to aluminum, or barium, or strontium. It refers to PFAS, per, and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And if you've never heard that term, congratulations. You're about to find out you've been contaminated since birth. PFAS is a family of over 4,000 synthetic compounds. They've been in commercial use since the 1940s. Non-stick cookware, that's Teflon. Stain-resistant carpets, that's Scotchgard. Firefighting foam, fast food wrappers, waterproof clothing, dental floss, pizza boxes, makeup, why? If it repels water, oil, or stains, there's a decent chance it contains PFAS. And here's the fun part. PFAS is nicknamed forever chemicals. Not because they last a long time in the environment, though they do, but because your body cannot break them down. Ever. Carbon-fluorine bonds are some of the strongest in organic chemistry. Your body literally cannot break them. Your kidneys look at PFAS the way a bouncer looks at a fake ID. Yeah, I see you. No, you're not leaving, except the bouncer never clocks out. And neither does the PFAS. The CDC has been tracking PFAS contamination since the early 2000s. And the data shows that by the 2020s, virtually 100% of tested Americans have detectable levels of at least one PFAS compound in their blood. 97% was the number from earlier datasets. The current number is higher, but 97% sounds scarier. So that's what goes viral. Right now, somewhere, there's a pregnant woman eating lunch. She's careful. Organic vegetables, filtered water, no alcohol. She's doing everything right. And while she eats, her body is quietly transferring heavy metals across the placenta. Not because she did anything wrong, but because the metals were already there. From the cookware her mother used, from the carpet in her childhood home, from the kale chips she bought last year thinking they were healthy. Her baby didn't ask to inherit this, but biology doesn't negotiate. Pregnant women exhibit significantly lower odds of tertiary metal combinations, cadmium, mercury, lead, in their blood compared to non-pregnant women. Lower. You'd think pregnancy would increase contamination, right? More caloric intake, more exposure. But no, pregnant women test lower. Why? Because the metals don't stay in the mother, they cross the placenta. The mother's body detoxes by transferring contaminants to the developing fetus. Not because she wants to, because the placenta doesn't have a filter for things that definitely shouldn't cross into a developing nervous system. It's like airport security, except instead of checking for prohibited items, it just waves everything through. Fetal exposure to heavy metals during critical development windows, first trimester, when the nervous system forms, carries higher risk of neurological damage. And there's no opt-out, no informed consent, just biology transferring the chemical body burden from one generation to the next. If you want to know what else is crossing into the next generation without your consent, hit subscribe. So if PFAS is in everyone and has been for decades, why are people blaming the sky? Because the real culprit isn't attractive, it's mundane, and that doesn't go viral. Blaming cookware doesn't get clicks. Blaming a secret government release program? That's content gold. Which raises a very uncomfortable question. If the science is clear and the data is public, why are government officials blaming the sky? To answer that, we need to go back to the 1990s, to a rancher in Washington state. And a very bad theory that refuses to go away. Rural Washington, 1990s. A rancher looks up, sees a gray plane, sees white vapor trails stretching across the sky, and he thinks, that's not normal. So he calls reporters. He theorizes that the aircraft is intentionally deploying chemicals, releasing something. The term chemtrails starts circulating, and 30 years later, it's federal policy. Contrails, short for condensation trails, form when hot, humid jet exhaust meets the extremely cold air of the upper troposphere. We're talking -40 to -70 degrees Fahrenheit. The exhaust contains water vapor, carbon dioxide, soot, and sulfur oxides. When that hits cold air, the water vapor condenses. And then it freezes. Ice crystals. That's it. That's the whole mystery. It's the atmospheric equivalent of seeing your breath on a cold day. Except instead of your mouth, it's a jet engine. And instead of accepting basic physics, you panic about secret government programs. The rancher in Washington saw a plane, saw a white streak, and concluded chemical release. Nobody explained to him that water vapor freezes at altitude. And now, 30 years later, his bad guess is federal policy. But here's where the HHS memo completely falls apart. July 14th, 2024. The Department of Health and Human Services issues an internal memorandum, and it's a masterpiece of institutional failure. Direct quote, "There are serious concerns SAI release is leading to increased heavy metal content in the atmosphere. Aerosolized heavy metals such as aluminum, barium, and strontium are released into the atmosphere under the auspices of combating global warming." SAI stands for Stratospheric Aerosol Injection, a theoretical geoengineering proposal. Emphasis on theoretical. It has never been deployed at scale, ever. And even if it were, it would happen in the stratosphere. That's 15 to 50 kilometers up. Contrails form in the troposphere. 0 to 12 kilometers. That's like a warning about sharks in a swimming pool. Technically, they're both water-based environments, but one of them doesn't have sharks. Aluminum is the third most abundant element in Earth's crust, roughly 8% by weight. Barium and strontium are widely distributed geologically. You are literally standing on tons of these metals right now, and when chemtrail investigators collect soil samples by scooping dirt into jars with their bare hands, then test the dirt for metals, they find metals. It's almost like soil is made of minerals. While actual dietary heavy metal contamination remains unregulated, remember, no federal action levels for thallium and kale chips, lawmakers in approximately 24 states have introduced legislation to criminalize non-existent weather modification programs. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs Senate Bill 56. Direct quote, "The free state of Florida means freedom from governments or private actors unilaterally applying chemicals or geoengineering to people or public spaces." Penalties? Up to $100,000, 5 years in prison, for chemtrails. You can go to prison for pretending to release chemicals, but you can legally sell problematic snacks to children as long as the bag says organic. Here's the part that should make you furious. The CDC has been testing 5,000 people per year since 1999. They publish the data online, for free. And yet millions of people think the real threat is vapor trails from jet engines. Meanwhile, the FDA confirms that toddlers face the highest estimated dietary intakes of actual heavy metals globally. Without regulatory intervention, no penalties, no recalls, no warning labels. Florida's Senate Bill 56 criminalizes unilateral application of chemicals to public spaces, which is fascinating because by that logic, every mosquito truck and crop duster in the state is now a felon. University of Louisiana Monroe, atmospheric science professor Ken Leppert, I direct quote, "It's pure myth and conspiracy. The streaks are actually primarily composed of water." EPA scientists describe the HHS memo's claims as physically impossible and unmoored to reality. And here's the scientific consensus. In 2016, a survey was published in the journal Environmental Research Letters. 76 out of 77 atmospheric chemists and geochemists were asked, is there evidence of a secret large-scale atmospheric release program? 976 said no. 1 said maybe. All cited evidence, soil samples, rainwater tests, atmospheric measurements, could be explained by standard contrail physics and natural atmospheric aerosols. And while lawmakers are busy criminalizing imaginary atmospheric programs, actual children are being harmed by actual food, with zero regulatory intervention. Which brings us to the most disturbing question of all. If the EPA knew kale chips were harming families, and the FDA knew toddlers had the highest heavy metal intake on the planet, why didn't they do anything? 2009. The EPA withdraws its reference dose for thallium. That's the RFD, the federal guideline for safe oral intake. The reason they give? Lack of confidence in the key toxicological study in rats. Translation: this seems hard. Let's just stop tracking it. Result: no federal health-based guidance value for safe thallium intake exists. At all. To this day. I'd fast forward to August 2022. A family in California is harmed. The EPA deploys an on-scene coordinator, collects 25 samples, finds nothing. Then they figure out it's the kale chips. Test them. Confirm thallium concentrations high enough to cause neurotoxicity in toddlers. And then, nothing. No investigation into the source of the thallium, no investigation into the company, no recall, no warning label, no penalties. The California Department of Public Health issues a report. Direct quote, CDPH is unaware of any investigations into the source of the thallium in the kale chips, preventive controls taken by the company to monitor or minimize thallium in the product, or any actions to alert consumers. We are unaware of any investigations. Not, we investigated and found nothing. Just unaware. At the time of the California incident, August 2022, thallium testing was entirely absent from the FDA's United States Total Diet Study. That's the FDA's flagship program for monitoring contaminants in food. They test for hundreds of chemicals, just not thallium. They didn't add it to the testing panel until August 2023. 1 year after the family was harmed, the EPA stopped tracking thallium safety in 2009, whilst the FDA didn't start testing food for it until 2023. That's a 14-year gap. For context, an entire generation of children was born, learned to walk, and started high school in that window. April 2023. 8 months after the California incident. The U.S. delegation to the Codex Committee on Contaminants in Foods proposes adding thallium to a priority list. They stress that it's an acute and chronic toxicant requiring international guidance values. Prior to August 2023. 1 year after the harm, the FDA conducts a preliminary analysis of brassica-containing products, kale chips, kale powder, broccoli powder, Brussels sprout chips. Results? Kale chips possess the highest thallium levels, up to 2.41 milligrams per kilogram. No recall, no warning, no action levels established. And the kale chip company? No public investigation was announced, no recall issued. Product may still be on shelves. Odds brand name not publicly disclosed in the case report. The company faced 0 penalties. You can probably find it with a quick search. 5-star reviews. Taste great. My kids love these. Yeah, about that, your kids might love them. So does thallium. It really bonds with nervous tissue. But that's not on the label. Comment below if you've ever bought something because it said organic or superfood on the label. Until federal action levels are codified, 9 agricultural manufacturers remain solely responsible for self-regulating neurotoxins. That's like asking McDonald's to decide how much problematic substance is acceptable in a Big Mac. The United States commercial market contains over 80,000 chemical substances. The CDC tracks roughly 5,000 people per year through NHANES. That's a ratio of 1 person per 16 chemicals. Great odds if you're a chemical. Terrible odds if you're a person. And the CDC can't test for everything. So they prioritize. They discontinue tracking well-characterized chemicals to free up resources for emerging toxins. Modern detection technology can find substances at parts per trillion, which sounds impressive until you realize it just means we're detecting contamination that was always there. We didn't get more contaminated, we just got better at noticing. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The scientific community has not established definitive danger thresholds for chronic, low-level exposure to cocktails of 4,000 plus PFAS compounds, or unregulated trace metals like thallium and cadmium. We don't know what happens when you combine PFAS with flame retardants, or when you add heavy metals to that mix, or when all of it bioaccumulates over decades. The synergistic effects, how chemicals interact in combination, are largely unknown. We're running the experiment in real time, on you. And because detection technology exists at parts per trillion sensitivity, substances like aluminum and flame retardants, PBDES, are now detected in virtually 100% of human blood and urine samples. That doesn't mean contamination increased. It means the baseline was always catastrophic. We just couldn't see it until recently. PFAS contamination originates from terrestrial consumer products. That's corporate speak for the stuff you bought at Target. Apparently, your non-stick frying pan has been conspiring with the government for 80 years. Or, and stay with me here, you just cooked with it. And the chemicals never left your body. PFAS has been in commercial use since the 1940s. DuPont marketed Teflon as a kitchen miracle. Eggs slide right off. They didn't mention the part where the chemicals slide right in and never leave. Your grandparents were contaminated. Your parents were contaminated. You were contaminated before you were born. It's a family heirloom. Except instead of silverware, you inherited industrial waste. At-home test kits for PFAS and heavy metals are now widely available. You can order one online. Mail in a blood or urine sample. Get results in 2 weeks. Sounds great, except most people have no idea how to interpret the numbers. They see aluminum, 12 micrograms per liter, and panic. Blame chemtrails. Start a Facebook group. The 95th percentile for aluminum in the US population is 14 micrograms per liter. They're normal. But without context, normal looks like a threat. Your blood test didn't find contaminants because someone released it last Tuesday. It found contaminants because you've been slow cooking in Teflon, Scotchgard, and microwave popcorn bags since the Reagan administration. PFAS bioaccumulates over decades. Some compounds have half-lives of 2 to 4 years in human blood. Translation? Even if you stopped all exposure today, threw out every non-stick pan, every waterproof jacket, every fast food wrapper, you'd still be contaminated until sometime in the 2030s. University of Chicago geophysicist David Keith, direct quote regarding the federal focus on chemtrails, "It's unmoored to reality. I expected there were documents like this, but seeing it in print is nevertheless shocking. Our government is being driven by nonsensical dreck from dark corners of social media," which is the most polite academic way to say, you're governing based on Facebook boomer memes. Because here's the nightmare scenario nobody's prepared for. You're being exposed right now, not by planes, by products you trust, by food labeled healthy, by furniture in your living room. And the agencies meant to stop it? They're chasing vapor trails. The FDA added thallium to their review list in 2023. 1 year after a family was harmed. It's like installing smoke detectors after the house has already burned down. But at least they're thinking about it now. Until federal action levels are codified, agricultural manufacturers self-regulate neurotoxins. The companies selling the food decide how much problematic substance is acceptable. I'm sure they're being very conservative. So just like tobacco companies were about lung cancer, and oil companies were about climate change, history suggests this will go great. You are carrying a chemical body burden that didn't exist 80 years ago. Some of it will never leave your body. Some of it will transfer to your children before they take their first breath. Regulatory agencies can't keep up. And public panic is focused on the sky. The CDC tracks 5,000 people per year. There are 80,000 chemicals in commerce. The math doesn't work, the oversight doesn't exist, and the contamination is baseline. So the next time you see a contrail in the sky and feel that spike of fear, stop. And ask yourself, what am I not looking at? Because the real contaminant isn't above you. It's in your hand. It's in your pantry. It's in your bloodstream. It's crossing into your baby. And the people screaming about the sky? They're making absolutely sure you never look down. Right now, someone is standing in a grocery store aisle, holding a bag of kale chips, reading the label. Organic, non-GMO, superfood. There's a smiling farmer on the bag. The bag says plant-based and gluten-free and sustainably sourced. It looks very healthy, very trustworthy, and they're about to buy it for their kids. If this changes how you look at your grocery cart, share this. So, because the wellness industry has more secrets than just kale chips, and most of them are sitting in your pantry right now.